Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to Local Food Forum's Better Dialogues, Gardens in a City, Cultivating Hope in Chicago. Thank you for signing up for this important subject. Urban farms and urban community gardens are playing a big role in supporting economic and social change in our under-resourced communities. And we're going to be talking to some great guests in a few minutes. First, I'd like to introduce Sarah Stegner, chef at Prairie Grass Cafe, who is going to introduce herself, talk a little bit about what she does.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sarah Stegner. I'm very happy to be here. I'm the chef owner of Prairie Grass Cafe along with my partner, George Bambaras. I want to tell everybody that is our supporters for this webcast. Thank you. The Community Food Navigator, which is our very special guest tonight, Nick Davis. Landmark Pest Management, Rebecca Fife. Chicago Market, a community co-op, has been a big supporter, and Mariano's, of course, they're hosting tonight. We are very appreciative of them, and Chicago Chef's Cook, which is Ida Davidman, Darren Guest, Melissa Kark, and myself. So thank you, and I'm happy to have our guests on, and we are ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're first going to be chatting with Nick Davis of Community Food Navigator. He's the executive director there, and he'll tell us a little bit about his organization and what its goals and mission are. And then we're going to bring in Natasha Nichols from We Sow, We Grow Urban Farm on the South Side, who's just become not only an amazing member of the urban agriculture community here, but also a powerful advocate. So, Nick, tell us a little bit about how Community Food Navigator got started and what you were trying to accomplish with this organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bob and Sarah. I really appreciate y'all inviting me to come chat with you all today. I'm super excited for the conversation. And just briefly, I want to make just a quick correction, Bob. I'm not the executive director, but I'm the managing director of communications and engagement. And I'm a very good 1-2 punch with our executive director, Lisa Tallman, who's an incredible leader, and has, brings tons and decades of nonprofit experience and kind of keeps us really organized. I think on the other hand, I'm a little bit more the agent of chaos, the one bringing in, some of the creative ideas, but and then also going out into community, building relationships with folks, figuring out what the needs are of growers on the ground, and then making sure that that translates to broader conversations throughout the food system. The role of the Community Food Navigator is really threefold. One is to build relationships and power amongst particularly growers of color and small scale growers in the Chicago food shed region. And for folks who aren't familiar with the language of food shed, it's kind of all of the different places that impact our foodways in a similar way that into a river, all of the ways in which we see food as a community come from southern Wisconsin, northern Indiana, Iowa, all of the rest, right? And so we want to make sure when we're thinking about coordinating our food system, we're thinking about it regionally. And so it's building power and coordinating the work that's happening on the ground, making sure that growers are aware of who's doing what in the space. It's also looking at who are all of the players in the food system and making sure that there's connective tissue between them, and that whatever they're doing, strategically, is informed by the needs of growers on the ground. And then the third thing that we're really charged with is storytelling. And so a lot of the way in which Chicago people have spoken about Chicago's foodways and our food culture hasn't always come from the perspective of growers. And so how do we make sure to, shift the narrative so that farmers, growers, producers are pushing their own narratives. And as a result, policymakers and advocates and community organizers and concerned citizens can all respond accordingly, right? And I think it's important that you have an organization, even though it seems like those are that has their hands in all of the above, because all of what I just spoke about is very much in conversation and relation with each other. The other piece is that the way that the community food navigator came about was very much through the demand of community, right? People who were growing food said there's not a ton of regional coordination to support the work that we're doing. They said there needs to be more avenues for communication and community building. People who are able to, build our capacity to grow as a food system. And while there's so many people who are doing incredible work, whether that's growing food, distributing food, working at food banks, restaurants, all of the rest, how do we make sure that they have a common understanding of what needs to be done, and uh, how do we make sure that they are in conversation with one another? And so all of the work that we've done has been community led. We're formed because of a series of listening sessions that our founders hosted with growers, over 200 interviews with folks throughout the food system, to determine, what those pain points were. And then, there was one plan in 2019 when these interviews were originally conducted, but as we all know, in 2020, COVID hit. And really what the Community Food Navigator oriented itself to do was to create digital spaces for growers of color to coordinate their resources and figure out how to, build power amongst themselves. Since we've emerged from that, we've really been able to turn our focus more towards meeting growers' needs directly on the ground, from mobilizing volunteers to activate their spaces to making sure that there is communication between folks at the state and federal level in terms of the programs they're rolling out. And getting all of that information down to growers. And then in the process of doing that, also making sure to give feedback when, federal grant programs, applications are just way too involved for somebody who is growing food, 8-10 hours a day to also be able to, throw in this grant application. It's a lot. And so we've thought of a bunch of ways to kind of build capacity for growers. And provide technical assistance on those fronts as well. So there's a variety of things that I'm happy to talk about, Bob, but that was a little bit about, the inception of the Navigator and our goal in terms of supporting growers of color.
Sarah?
Thank you so much. That's so much information, and it's awesome what you're doing. I want to ask, when we talk specifically about community gardens, what kind of scope are we talking about? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Sarah. I think for today's conversation, we're thinking of community gardens in a super expansive way, right? Anyone who grows food with the intention of distributing that within their community, even if their community is just their family. So a community garden can just be, a backyard plot that you've got in a raised bed, right? It could also look like what Natasha has, which is a much larger scale, city plot with multiple raised beds, and she would actually be able to, speak better to the scale that she's operating at. But she's also able to, feed multiple members of the community, distribute at scale. There are community gardens that are set up where an organization like Neighbor Space, for instance, will own the land, and then people who are just like walking by or live in the neighborhood would be able to just take over a raised bed and then cultivate it for whatever they want, right? They could be cultivating, flowers for fun, or they could be growing food to supplement themselves. But a lot of gardens that exist around the city, honestly, are just passion projects of people who are really interested in increasing their access to healthy food, having a relationship to the land that they're on, and figuring out, how it is that I think a lot of folks there's a lot more that's produced in these community gardens than we think, and I'm happy to start to actually get into some of that data too if you're interested in that. But there's the largest portion of community gardens really exist on the south and west sides of Chicago, but it is widespread throughout the city, and you can find them anywhere if you're looking close enough. And so and I'm happy to talk too more about the benefits and stuff of community gardens if that's interesting to you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to know. I want to know how it has impacted the communities.
Mm-hmm. There are a variety of ways. Some studies that were conducted back in 2013. Daniel Block, who's a researcher with, it might be UIC. Let me get back to, or Chicago State.
Chicago State, I think it is.
Chicago State. Okay, thank you. Him and Benjamin Helpand and and a couple others produced, Amy DeLorenzo, I believe, produced a study where they looked at how many pounds of vegetables or produce was grown on community gardens in a year. This was back in 2013, but in 2013, there was over 500,000 pounds of food that was produced in community gardens. That impact alone could feed at least, according to the average amount that a family consumes, which is tough to pin down anyway, but on average, if your family consumes 2 tons of food per year for a 4-person family. What we're talking about is being able to feed at least, I should have done that math a little bit ahead of time, but I believe that's, if it's 2 tons, that's 250 families that are able to be fed just through community gardens alone. But most of these families are just supplementing their food with this. And so it's not their direct the most one-to-one relationship. People aren't feeding their families entirely with what they're getting from community gardens, but mostly supplementing it. This food is also produced across 43.5 acres. So you can imagine 43.5 acres might sound like a lot to some folks, but it's actually not that much land to be volume of food on that small amount of land. Shows you the density that's able to be grown in urban plots. And some of the things that were most popular were tomatoes, squash, beans, Swiss chard, all of these different varieties of kind of healthy and hardy foods. And so the vast majority of what people were growing was also really nutritious, nutrient dense and nutritious. And the food that they grow themselves is a really important piece of the benefit of community gardens. But honestly, to me, that's just like one of several benefits that provides. One of the bigger things that I think that community gardens produce is an anchor point for the community, right? So you've got a place that could have been any sort of space prior. Oftentimes they're empty lots or open fields and those types of things. Being converted into a growing space suddenly creates an environment where there's going to be somebody who's on that space on a regular basis, who's laying eyes on the community. There are people who are walking by what might have been a space that had, debris or trash or whatever it was, right? And is now a green space. And psychologically, what that does for communities is huge. And there's a lot of studies about the psychological effects of, greening communities as well. And also, what we've been able to see is, in communities that have had like high tension, high conflict because of the conditions of not having access to food, that's a very activating condition to be under on a regular basis. If on one hand you're able to go into a public space and pick food and feed yourself, that actually decreases your tendency for conflict. But on top of that, you've got people who are out every single day in the community. It creates an environment that actually like prevents violence and incentivizes community to come out and wrap their arms around a space and provides a foundation for that community to be able to demand more for themselves as well. So it's almost like an organizing hub for a lot of communities. And we've seen places where people are really scared to even have their kids to school from their homes. Now having the elders in the community put their chairs back out on their porches and start to have conversations with each other. And it's really an opportunity for the community to get to know each other more outside of just growing food for each other. So there are huge benefits that come with that.
It sounds like a really powerful piece to the solution to our problems. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and food is not just like a core need, but the ways in which you go about growing food and bringing the community into that, the way you go about feeding people, and making that a communal thing. The more that you're in space with other folks in your community, the more that you are likely to resolve conflict before it gets to a certain point. The more that you're aware of what your neighbors need, right? So there's not as much of an individualistic feel. So it's almost as if growing food is a side effect of a community garden as opposed to the intention. So yeah, I think they're a huge part of the solution. So
Yeah, Nick,
That's great.
could you I'm sure that a lot of people in this audience have heard the term food sovereignty. but could you address and define it a little bit more clearly?
Absolutely. So food sovereignty is a term that really describes when a community is able to determine what food it has access to and how, right? And so giving community, it's very simplest terminology. It's a community should be able to determine what access to food they have, what options there are, and how they go about, getting that food. Not everything is possible to grow in Chicago, but we've got some of the most fertile soil in Illinois, in the world, right? And so there's a variety of things that can be grown, but the food that ends up actually on grocery store shelves and available to consumers is very rarely, the uh, well, is particularly in communities of color that have been disinvested. It's very rarely what that community is asking for, and in food insecure communities or places where people struggle to figure out where their next meal is, or if your home is not within 2-3 mile radius of a grocery store and you don't have a vehicle, then your food choices are incredibly limited. And oftentimes, if you look in communities of color and communities that have been heavily disinvested from, if you walk down the street, the food options that are available to them are not necessarily the healthiest. They can lead to increased rates of diet-related disease. They are packaged, processed, things that can stay on shelves for long periods of time. And as we know, those aren't necessarily the foods that are going to sustain our health the most. But also, it's important to note that it's important not to judge or criminalize the decisions that people in those communities do make, but instead increase their capacity to have more options so that they can make healthier choices. At the end of the day, it's true that fast food and canned food and all of this stuff is truly the more affordable option right now. We all know what it's like to go to the grocery store and be hit with that check at the end or the receipt at the end, and it just is like mind-boggling how much it takes to put food on the table. What food sovereignty really is about is being able to pursue a variety of methods to be able to feed yourselves and be able to have autonomy as to what food you're growing, yeah, and what food is available within your community. So when we talk about food sovereignty, we are actually talking about a multitude of realities. Like there isn't one definition for food sovereignty all throughout Chicago because it looks different in Auburn Gresham than it looks in Chatham and in Inglewood and in Austin, right? That is to be determined by those communities themselves. What food do we want? What's culturally relevant? What's nutrient dense? What do we want our kids eating? What do we want to see growing when we're walking down the street, right? What the community food navigator is trying to do is make sure that all the people who want to participate in that process of growing food and choosing what their communities want have access to that. And we can start to remove, some of the, we can, build community to remove some of the institutional barriers that people face to achieving food sovereignty for their communities.
Yeah, and after we had a conversation a few weeks ago for a story in Local Food Forum, and after having this discussion about food sovereignty, it occurred to me that is pretty much synonymous with empowerment. And so often the discussion about food insecurity, about creating more food options for people in under-resourced communities involves, funding for the SNAP program. It involves, um, what can government do for people, and or putting a supermarket in a community. And yeah, I mean, if you put a supermarket in a community that lacks one, people will have more access to healthier food. But I can tell you as a resident of Lakeview, and which I call food oasis, because you can hardly throw a stone without hitting a supermarket. But I can walk to the Whole Foods a few blocks away, and I can subsist entirely on cake, cookies, candy, and soda, like just like in a conventional supermarket. So refocusing on what people can do to help themselves, to feed their communities, I feel is incredibly empowering.
Yeah, I think so. And it's really the growers themselves and the farmers. I mean, people like Natasha who are really doing that work. For us, it's really just about how do we respond to what they see as some of this barriers that they don't have time to access, on top of being, business owners and parents and farmers and soil scientists and crop geneticists and all of that that it takes to really grow food. the least we can do is start to remove some of the institutional barriers that it takes to get there. But I really have full faith that it's the people who actually have their hands in the soil that are going to solve this whole thing. It's really just about us getting the hell out the way.
Yeah.
Nick, would you please introduce Natasha?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to introduce Natasha. So Natasha's a rock star all around. She has been in the urban ag space for quite some time now, but I believe, and I'll let her tell her story a little bit more, but I believe I remember getting into this work through really trying to figure out how to get healthy access to food for her kids, if I'm not mistaken, and also just like the Natasha was a I'll enter a couple stories, or I'll have her tell her story. But what I'll say is that whenever I walk into a space where people are talking about agriculture and there's like any convening at a statewide, countywide, citywide level, no matter who is represented in that room, Natasha's there, and I have no idea how that's even possible. There are a lot of growers who are in the Chicago region who don't have the time and capacity to produce the like quantity that she does, and also have their hands in so many different things, but also in terms of how she thinks about activating her growing space. The vision was always far beyond, how can I just turn this plot into a place where I grow food, but how can you create a model for the community to become interested in their own health and figure out, through actually getting their hands in the soil, how is it that they can kind of transform their entire futures? I mean, there are people when we were out and volunteering on Natasha's farm that would drive by with their window down and would just honk and say, what the heck is going on out here? And Natasha would go out and have a conversation with them. And I'm more than confident that that person has a better understanding of, nutrition, what it takes to grow food, and like why that should matter, after that conversation, than they did before. And I think in terms of being that community anchor point, and dealing with all of the mess that comes with trying to do a community project slowly, that's place-based, that's grassroots. She's gone through all of it, and so if we can use Natasha's narrative to plant the seed for a lot more people to get involved in urban agriculture, then I think we might have this thing figured out in a few years. And so if we can all figure out ways to get out of Natasha's way, then and others, then I think we're going to be in a good spot.
And Natasha
And
is also is such a rock star. She was also the star of a recent documentary.
oh, that's right. And is also, just today hosted Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who, was going on a speaking tour and went down to her space too. So there's, it's her farm, We Sow We Grow, is is creating a lot of attention. And all in positive ways for the work that we're doing. And so it really made sense for me to, invite her to be part of this conversation today. And Natasha, if you wouldn't mind, just introducing yourself just a little bit, and then I've got a couple of questions to explore, the story for We Sow We Grow too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all the kind words. I appreciate it. We had a glitch. Somebody in this house, either two-legged or four-legged, detached the internet connection. So we don't know. We'll blame the four-legged one just to be nice. The We Sow We Grow project started in 2016. My husband and I moved to the far south side of Chicago from the west side, East Garfield Park, because we built a home in partnership with Habitat for Humanity. And what happened was a greater desire to get fully rooted into community projects. I had already been connected with the Illinois Farm Bureau through their Illinois Farm Families program, and we worked with them for a year through a initiative called City Moms, where it took moms from the city or from urban areas, metropolitan areas, and had them visit farms in rural areas so that we could ask questions. This was when the whole conversation around GMOs and organic versus hybrid, conventional versus organic farming, all of that happened, and we were able to ask questions of the people who were actually in the battlefield. And instead of me taking it and thinking, okay, well, this is it, I looked at what we had and I wanted to start growing myself. And to see the passion of the farmers that we met with, there's always this hierarchy, I guess, from urban to rural, and to figure out that I could grow in a city as large as Chicago, was a huge challenge to me. And I got started right away when we saw that right across from our house was a vacant lot, and it was three parcels of land that had not been developed in over 15 years. We asked the aldermen, they said yes. We wanted to start a community garden. The community said absolutely not. We worked too hard to come back and play in a garden, after work or on the weekends. We want to be able to have our own time. You grow it, we'll buy it. And that is where we pivoted in 2016. And we got a little bit of star help from Harry Connick Jr. because we were attempting to get donations in order to start this entire organization. And he made one phone call, and all of a sudden everybody said yes to us when they had said no prior. So that was actually the beginning of our project. And this is our 8th season growing. My initial reasoning for starting the entire project was because I was moving from a neighborhood where everyone knew me and everyone watched out for the children. And, we knew birthdays, and we knew when babies were born and parents passed away and people graduated from high school or college or 8th grade. And I moved over here and no one spoke to anyone, or at least not to me. And everybody was walking by and chucking garbage into the vacant lot. So we started cleaning, and people, when they don't know you from the neighborhood, want to know, what are you doing? I don't know who you are. Why are you here doing this? And we were able to start garnering support for the entire project. The very first year, we had a tough year. Even with the help of Harry Connick Jr., someone let their dogs go into our chicken coop, and they slaughtered all of our hens. People were coming through and just removing crops, whenever they felt like it without asking. But I am, if anything, stubborn. And that stubbornness and that desire to see my own community flourish kept me doing this work. Nick makes me sound like a rock star. I'm very tired, you all. And I couldn't do this work without the support of my husband and my children and my father. If they didn't say yes to all of the crazy ideas that I had, it wouldn't be able to happen. And I'm forever grateful. Today's visit from the lieutenant governor literally got planned in like 3 days. So her office called. I told my husband and the children, and everybody rallied together to help me out. And I'm fortunate to have that type of support. And I'm also fortunate to have a husband who knows when his wife gets a crazy idea, she's going to see it through. So we just kind of fall in line and do what we did. And he'll tell anybody he didn't see the vision at all. But now we are fenced in. We're partnered with the Community Food Navigator. We're partnered with the Community Growers Program. We wrote a grant through the Community Food Growers Program, and that awarded us another acre of land to go with the 1/4 acre that we're growing on now. And we're moving forward to try to add another acre to that 1.25 acres so that we can create a green corridor and a farmstead so people can come to someplace in their community to relax in a Zen garden, to get fresh fruit from our orchard, to learn how to grow at our educational farm, or just to hang out for a workshop in our community center. And we are looking forward to doing that and changing the narrative that people often apply to Black communities, brown communities, or just not as affluent as our, Lincoln Parks and Roger Parks and any park that you can think of. We want to change that narrative. And we also want the folks in our community to move from apathy at being ignored for so long to actual ownership and pride in what they have, so that they can start inviting people out to the far South Side.
That's incredible, Natasha. And I, love hearing all of that. I think especially this piece about the struggles, like the realities of the struggles of dealing with community, and you know how even like well-intentioned projects end up coming up against resistance if there's not trust and relationship, and like a practice of a way to like, how do I be around this space, how do I pick Swiss chard without, you know, completely
Right,
uprooting the plant, those
right.
types of things, right? All of that takes is like different levels of education. So who am I, what does it mean to be in relationship with this piece of land, how do I actually, you know, understand, you know, how to harvest this piece of food and the nutritional value of it and all of that. But this, that piece that you just said about, you know, going from apathy to ownership, I think is really, have you been able to kind of see the community move along that spectrum? And yeah, what are, do you have any like stories or flashpoints that you could point to too, that you're like, well, and then this person came along, you know?
Oh, we have tons of stories. First of all, we couldn't keep watermelon on the farm to save our lives. We would grow beautiful globes of watermelon and then wake up the next morning and it would be gone. So whoever enjoyed our watermelon, I hope they got the runs. Um, but I'm also grateful that we were able to provide something sweet and juicy, you know, for folks. Uh, I think the community changed from being weird about seeing something like this go up to having a sense of pride and ownership, because I live in the community. I'm a fixture in the community, so I'm that person who's, you know, out interacting with the children, and then the children bring their parents back up, and you know they know. And I am not ashamed to say, for the first couple of years, we made it where folks in the community were the only folks that we were having as our volunteers, because we wanted it to be a truly communal feeling, and not, you know, folks who wanted to get pats on the back for charity work, and then, you know, they go back home, they leave the neighborhoods that they're working in. It took a while for us to open it up to a greater standard, mostly because we needed support in the form of donations and donors, and the larger network that we had was able to do that, rather than the folks that we were serving in West Pullman. um, I've learned a lot, and I've also learned that it's not that people don't want to do things, or don't want to have nice things, or, you know, don't want to do the work. But honestly, when you beat people over the head over and over through years of systemic, you know, abuse, or, you know, ignoring, or just general, you know, we're not gonna pump any money into that neighborhood at all, because not enough people are complaining, or not enough people are banding together, you get used to it. So now you have this 5'2" Black woman coming through and kind of firing everyone up, and it's a little bit different, and it is exhausting, because you often become the target, you know, for people's frustration, because they think that we have a lot more power than we do, because it seems to be. I talk a lot, you know, I don't mind being a voice for folks, and it all started from food. But, you know, once people realize that through a phone call, or attending a town hall, or coming to a community event that we have on the farm, they can meet people like their elected officials, or the lieutenant governor, or the state senator, or, you know, a representative from DC who's coming and visiting us, things start to shift. You know, there's a paradigm shift for a lot of people, and then it's like, oh, okay, this does work. Because when we first started, a lot of the narrative around it was, why are you doing that? White people do that. So we had to change, what makes you say that something like this is only available to someone who is white, or someone who lives in a richer neighborhood, or someone who has a college degree, or someone, you know, there's all these what else. Why isn't it, why don't you think that you deserve having an urban farm right in your neighborhood, or having a Zen garden, or having a fruit orchard, or having a place to kind of convene without having to go so far out of the neighborhood? Why don't you think you deserve that? And that, through a seed being planted, are the types of conversations and hard questions and talks that we're having within our community.
There's a question in the chat that I think is relevant here. Lou Ebling asks, is the city of Chicago supportive to community gardens? There are so many vacant lots that could be used. And he says, I hope so. Let's talk a little bit about that and what obstacles exist to utilizing those open spaces.
There's so much red tape. And Nick will be able to probably give more statistical data for it. The city of Chicago is doing better than it did when we first started, if that makes sense. And it also has to do with who's elected. So local elections really matter. My alderman happens to be all in with everything that we're doing for the farm, and he was elected. This is his first year. The alderman that we had beforehand was not as receptive or supportive of the farm. Excuse me. And then the city, I don't think the city of Chicago actually understands urban ag well. Nick, can you take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the city of Chicago has a growth for sure in terms of being really supportive of these growing spaces. Up until just either last year or the year before, the city of Chicago didn't even have an urban agriculture like business license, and so you couldn't actually operate a farm business, in Chicago that was like an urban agriculture farm business. It existed in this kind of like gray area of business licenses, right? And so that's not necessarily the type of thing that encourages, entrepreneurship in this area. And in terms of, being able to get onto plots of land, whether that's, the city, county, state, all the rest, there's tons of vacant plots all throughout Chicago. Figuring out who owns it and tracking it down and figuring out how to transfer ownership, figuring out how to tax that land, all of these different things, like it's a monster of paperwork and sleuthing and figuring out how to get onto it. And you really do need the support of someone quite powerful if you're an individual who's trying to get on land, and you don't already own it, right? And so for Natasha, that could be like an alderman who's looking out and says, we know that these parcels are available and it's easy for you to get on it. But in terms of there's a variety of factors which growers have to think about that go well beyond even, what would it cost to get this business, to get a farm or a garden off of the ground? What does it take to get access to the land? What does it take to own the land? What does it take to get water onto the land? What does it take to get power? And so, people are kind of ducking, dodging different policies that were created to do a variety of things, but none of which make it really easy to grow food in Chicago. And some places even have ordinances where you could get a ticket for having a hoop house in your backyard, right? Or having, a high tunnel or a greenhouse or something like that, right? Because it's considered it's somehow breaks a code for what the neighborhood is trying to do, or there's a certain aesthetic that the neighborhood is trying to push, and you can get a citation for something like that. And so I think in general, the city of Chicago is a place where we have been on the cutting edge of urban agriculture for a really long time. We are right up there, with Milwaukee and Detroit, and other cities in terms of, just like how much is being produced across the space of Chicago or across the city. But in terms of like its ease of the ease of getting onto land, the ease of growing food, that's not easy to do. In deindustrialized places throughout the city, particularly on the south and west sides, where homes were demolished that had lead and arsenic in the paint, then you have to contend with those heavy metals being in the soil now, right? And so you need to get tested for that. You're trying to water your plants, but some of the pipes might have lead in them too. So you have to make sure that you get your pipes tested. So there are all these things that are kind of like structural and infrastructural that are barriers. There are policies that are barriers, like not having the license. There are like financial barriers to getting things off of the ground. And then there's just everything that Natasha was talking about, which is getting the community on board with growing, getting them to understand what it is that the project is that you're trying to, get across the finish line, and then just dealing with people issues, right? The two-legged problems. And a lot of those, I think, the growing pains of those uh, are really, I've found that the growers who are able to, you know, stick it out, it's worth it because you end up building these longer lasting relationships that move through conflict, and you know how to kind of you get to know each other a lot better by engaging that conflict than just uh by refusing to get involved in it at all. And the communities come tighter. But yeah, it is um it's a city where both there's more resources than there ever have been, you know, at this moment for growing, and it's still difficult to navigate them. Um, and so, you know, it's a mixed bag, but we have some of the best growers in the city. I mean, in the world, you know, in the city.
Yeah, and you know, I just was in Detroit for a few days, and I visited with Keep Growing Detroit. And you know, maybe necessity is the mother of invention because the economy had plummeted so badly there. Unemployment rates were so disproportionate, and there was so much vacant land. I mean, we're talking about a city that lost two-thirds of its population. That it might have conceivably some of the obstacles you were talking about here in Chicago might have been eased because they just needed to give people these opportunities through the work of Baba Malik Yakini and keep going in Detroit. You know, the numbers that I hear there are astounding. You know, 2,000 more than 2,000 growing spaces in Detroit, 25,000 people involved in them in some way or other. What is the potential for community food navigator? I don't want to put you on the spot and say, okay, you're going to get real big, but is this the kind of role that community food navigator can play in terms of pushing this movement forward?
What I would say our role is to create the environment for something like what Malik Yakini has created, right? Because at the end of the day, our organization is positioned to almost be like a Swiss Army knife for the food system. There are issues that growers bring to us, and we figure out, you know, who are the best people to address that, and then how can we kind of form ourselves in different, you know, coalitions and convening groups to be able to address those issues. And I think out of something like that, something like the you know, Detroit People's Food Co-op, for instance, and other projects that have come out of that could come to light. I see us a little bit more as like the convener and the driver and kind of getting a collective vision, especially because what Baba Malik has been able to do over there is incredibly uh, is very, very place-based, right? And so we can support the development of something like that in Chicago, but when we're looking at the region, we're also looking, okay, how can um, the, you know, Black Oak Center in Pembroke, for instance, support the formation of something like that in Chicago, right? And then I also think there are people who are like starting these food co-ops and farmer coalitions and are really focused you know, supporting whether, you know, it's like Black growers in particular or Black communities or brown communities in particular, right? That are doing kind of that grassroots work. We come in and we say, what resources do you need to be able to make something like that happen? Who do we need to convene? And how can we build capacity for something like that to come into existence? And I
Nick,
see Natasha came after you too. Yeah, go ahead.
for people who may not know, explain what place-based means.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it means a variety of things, but really what this looks like, I mean, he's looking at like block by block, the community that he lives in, how he can use, you know, where he lives as kind of the center where there's a kind of radius of activity that's happening around there, where there's grassroots community organizing that's happening, you know, block by block. When we're looking at what Detroit was able to do, they were able to connect a bunch of those projects throughout the city that were already doing kind of block by block organizing, and decided, you know, this region of the city, and I don't know the geography, you know, particularly well, but there's an entire region of the city that where like a lot of the urban agriculture is concentrated, and that like physical place and the people who live within that is where they're, you know, most concerned. And where the community food navigator, we're across the city. And so like I said earlier, you know, Englewood might have a different version of what food sovereignty means to them than Pullman, for instance, right? Um, and so they can both have kind of like place-based community organizing that's going on, but they might not necessarily have the same vision. And so I say that to say also that the community food navigator can't go in and say, you know, this is what food sovereignty means for you all. hey, what's emerging from the conversations that you all are having with community? How do we better resource y'all to be able to do this? But yeah, I think that answer. I don't know if you want to throw in more there, Natasha, too.
Well, making sure that the communities are actually in charge of the way that things look, instead of having someone outside telling us what we should be doing. It's the it's the issue that I think a lot of people have with folks going from one country to another, America to any country, and kind of telling them what is better. And one of the things that stuck out with me that Juliana Stratton said is all of these different urban ag spaces are growing culturally relevant foods. So for me, I would lose a lot of customers if we didn't have collard, mustard, and turnip greens. And people are they can look down their nose at it, or if they want, but that's what's relevant to the community that we have here. And then I also have the ability to show other neat ways to prepare them, instead of just even though boiling them down is delicious, always be perfect, but there are other ways to prepare. And when you start using those ways to engage people within the community, things are better, because you're not talking at them. This is an actual conversation between an organization and the community that they're serving. And it's even better when the folks in the organization reflect that community. So it's that's a hard conversation to have too. And I didn't answer the city of Chicago supportive question. It's hard for them to be supportive, because I don't think half of them exactly know how community gardens and urban farms work. They can't give us an actual answer, because things are changing so much. And then we're waiting for people to understand legal ramifications and certifications that we have to have. Half of them don't know. So, we're depending on city officials who are elected to know this stuff, to then approve us for things that we know we need, but they don't know. So we gotta get on the same wavelength.
Natasha, I have a question for you. I want to know if you have a vision for where you're taking this, and how, like, is that long term? Is it a big thing, or is it, do you do it year by year or step by step? Where's your head at with that?
So the running joke is I quit every month. every month. But I feel like this is my way to interact and do outreach with the community, because it's something that I absolutely love to do, to the point where I'm not getting paid for it yet.
That might be a goal.
Yeah, a goal is to get paid, yes. And another goal is to actually hire staff, so that we can create this urban farmstead within, West Pullman, that attracts folks and attracts businesses, because once that happens, developers will come through, because there are things happening in the community, and then our community will start getting things that they deserve, like more than one grocery store in the community, and restaurants along Halsted. There's nothing better than being able to walk outside your house, go to a main thoroughfare, and shop boutiques and stores and bookstores and coffee shops and everything. We do not have that at all. We have to go to other communities. We have to go to Beverly, or um, um, Beverly or Evergreen Park, or we have to go to a suburb. We want to be able to do this within our community. And I have plans to stay here until, I stop breathing. And then hopefully we'll have plans in place where we can hand it over to folks who are going to love it and the work and the mission as much as I do.
That's beautiful. And we are wrapping up on our time here. So I want to ask if there are questions. We can open the mics for that. But I also want to tell you that if you have a call to action for the people that are on here, this group of people there's quite a few chefs on tonight. There are people in the food community. There are people involved with Green City. you have some leaders and organizations. What do you need? What can we do? Because I think it's always good to have that kind of, you have an audience, here's your moment.
What do
Like
I
a
do?
like a call to action. What can we do?
We need money. We need recurring donors, and we need folks to help spread our message for sure. We have a goal in the next 2 years to raise $3 million to build out our infrastructure, and to start providing community resources regularly. So we would like to offer after school activities for students in camps during summer and spring break and winter break. We want to be able to be a resource, so that the parents know where they are. We want to build up that uh, community web like I had when I was growing up. And both, bluntly, money is the only way that we're going to be able to do that. So we are attempting to do a campaign where we have folks pledge and become recurring donors, starting at $25 a month. And another is just sending people over to do things as simple as buy eggs or garlic from us, or share our story as they see it. And anytime people come through, normally when they take a tour, they leave as supporters of We Sow We Grow. So that's how we're growing as well. And the more people that make their way over to walk through our farm, or volunteer or eat our eggs, they become supporters. And that's what we need. We're small but mighty, but we're going to get there.
Thank you. Yes, you sound really mighty. Bob, can you read Matt's question? I didn't see it, but I saw
Yes,
that he was.
yeah. Yes, Matthew Ruffey, who is the president of the Chicago Market Board. He's the manager of the Uptown Farmers Market, and also headmans the Link Up Illinois program. It says, we help run a 140 plot community garden here in Uptown. And he says this whole talk has been music to his ears. While our gardens are more about the casual gardener getting their hands dirty, we have about 20 grow to give plots that we all help to garden, that the food then goes to a local group. And I ask a question. Obviously, food education is such an important part of a food program. What do you do? Or maybe what do you suggest that those of us trying to get better at running a community garden should do to help educate?
So I have weekly chats with folks, and we've started having coffee meetups. You also have to probably think outside of the box. So we have a community member who is going to teach us how to roast our own coffee beans at home, and we're going to do it Ethiopian style. And it doesn't always have to center around the gardening aspect, but getting people to the garden to do things with you. And then that's when they end up coming back and asking questions about the food that we're growing. Also being really, really open. I had to change the way that I reacted to people not respecting the farm the way that I expected them to. We have a fence, and we caught some preteens trying to jump the fence because they were trying to see our chickens in the chicken coop. And instead of giving the reaction that I wanted to, I went out and actually opened the farm up for them to look. And before I know it, now we have preteens visiting us every single day after school to ask questions and bringing their parents in. So not doing that knee-jerk reaction, which is what I do, and I'll be the first to admit it. It's why are you trying to, this is all hard work and everything that we're doing, stop doing this, and the fussing and the kind of cutting people off at their knees. I had to change the way that I reacted. And when I did that, more people started wanting to know more about what we were growing and the difference between white eggs and blue eggs and green eggs and brown eggs and why they happen. So it opened the door when we started thinking outside of the box and the events that we have on the farm as well. So I had to not always be gardening focused, but community focused, and looking at the community and seeing what brings them together. So if that's a movie night, we have a blow up projection screen, and we show movies Friday nights during the summertime. and everybody can come through and hear the chickens, and then they come back the next day because they want to see what was making the noise when the sun went down. And being open to pivot. It's like the word of the year. I know Friends makes fun of it, but the art of the pivot, and knowing that this work is like water. You got to be fluid. You can't be stuck in your ways. And that was a hard lesson that I had to learn too.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that too, that fluidity is not cheap. I mean, it is and it's already an industry with such slim profit margins that then being able to, build in all of that compassion that Natasha does have to. I mean, there's cost to that, and she spends a lot of time. She just invests a tremendous amount of capacity. And so when we think about monetary farm business, but like I said earlier, to support really what's like an anchor in the broader community, and someone who's expending a ton of capacity, probably preventing other community conflicts from popping up down the road. And what I think about is not just the how many mouths do you feed or how many people do you educate and all of that, but also how many lives do you change where downstream there's like generations of people who understand where their food is coming from. They understand why they should care about it. They understand how to interact with the farm space. They understand how to move through conflict in healthy ways. They understand how to center themselves and build relationships with the land that they're on. You know what I mean? It's like all of those things come into play when you're a gardener. This is why I am very serious when I call farmers, like our heroes, because there's so many components baked into what is asked of them, just having this space on a corner, but we only really talk about the food production avenues. I also see Ken's got a question that I'm sure he wants to ask out loud.
Yes, we've opened your mic, Ken. This is Chef Ken Polk, good friend of
Hi, Ken.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, I missed a bunch because I was in another meeting. Tell me where the farm is located.
11958 South Union Avenue.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm Inglewood, born and raised. So I know everything you're talking about. I lived it. Yeah, I'm Inglewood. So at any rate, all I want to know is, when can I come cook?
Come on. We were just actually talking about getting the Blackstone griddle, flat top griddle, and doing breakfast on the farm using our vegetables.
Okay,
our
I'm in. I'm in
Oh,
too.
that's precious. That's precious. You don't have to get a Blackstone. That's just a name.
No.
Yeah,
It was what I was saying, what I was looking at. But
all we need is some cast iron. Just give me. All we need is some cast iron who cares? Cast iron and who cares? And let's get it cracking. Part of the reason you were speaking my language earlier about why, when people were asking why are you doing what the white people do, and I literally had the exact same responses when I started my culinary journey, and people were asking me, why are you cooking these white people food? Why can't you just cook regular food? Not realizing that there is no, what is regular food? I don't know. But I quickly learned. And so that became my mission in all of my cooking, to bring people to an understanding, if you will, that is all of our food. One. Number two, and I like to take things that they are used to or give them to them in ways that they're not used to getting it, or ingredients that they are unfamiliar with, and getting it back to getting them reacquainted or familiar with them again. And part of the thing that you talked about in terms of being in the community and such and so forth, one of the things that terrifies me, or I've come to the realization of, big market stores don't make it in our communities because of subsistence. Because people, they don't know what to do with those ingredients that are in those big grocery stores, or they don't know what to do with that produce if it's not of the big three that you just talked about. If it's not collard, mustard, or turnip, they're not touching it, because they don't realize the benefit of the spinach or the kale or the different kinds of kale or the chard or any of these other leafy greens that are so beneficial to us. And so, the trick is, for me, is to mix it up. I'll take 3 ingredients that they know and throw one that they don't. So it's kind of like 2 truths and a lie. It's like, right. Oh, this is good. Well, you didn't know you liked it.
Right.
But I like it. Yeah, Mikey, you like it. And so, that's one of the things that I do. And I just, Man, let's set a date, and I can come out, and Sarah's in, and she's like the
Okay.
queen of Illinois.
We can do it. We can do it, absolutely.
She's the queen of. I'm telling y'all,
So
she's the
funny.
queen of Illinois. She knows where everything comes from. She probably look at an onion and tell you where it was grown. And so we just want to.
Oh, I'm
I
serious
gotta
that
come
she's
cook.
going to bring the dessert too. Or
Yeah,
she
I'm
from
in. So
Verzenay.
let's.
yeah,
So
well,
yeah. So let's get it cracking.
yeah, now this is an offer that Natasha can't possibly refuse. And I hope I merit an invitation to this feast.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, and
Everybody's invited.
as a matter of fact, what make it even cooler is I'm going to literally go through the garden picking stuff, and we're gonna cook whatever the heck we pick. That's it. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna bring some spices, some seasonings. You can even name the chickens that are gonna.
Yeah.
You can
Now
you can pre-pick
the chickens
chickens.
aren't going to be cooked, but you can use all the eggs that they have.
Yeah, we can do
have
something with
beets,
eggs.
we have okra,
Oh, that's fine.
we have
That's
so
fine.
much stuff. Yeah.
Souffles. It is. I'm just kidding.
And if you all need a sous chef, I seriously have
Yeah.
excellent tips.
I just
Yeah,
want to thank the sponsors and all the people that have come on, and please feel comfortable to stay now and stay on for a few minutes and chat with Nick and Natasha and Ken, and we'll just keep the conversation going for a few minutes. If you want to unmic, you're welcome to participate with us.
Yes.
Isn't this a great conversation? I mean, this is just, wow. We're learning so much, and we're getting to know so much more about an important topic. And let's see, let's see about whatever, if there are more questions here that we can mine. Oh, Matthew, who asked a question about community gardens before, asked for a very practical thing. What can you do about the Chicago rats that are a problem for community gardeners? But Matthew, we're going to connect you with our friend Rebecca Fife from Landmark Pest Management, who's a supporter of this.
Natasha, do you know Rebecca Fife from Landmark?
Do not.
She works with some community gardens that she talks to people about how they can protect their own food source from pests so that you don't have to bring in a specialist. She teaches people how to do that. And if you'd like us to connect you to her, she's good at what she does.
Okay. That sounds good. And Christine, yes, we totally can do dairy farmers. I'm connected with a couple through the state of Illinois, but I literally want people to learn more about what they're consuming and how much work it takes to get to their tables, and great ways to know the way that we're getting that food, because everybody, even adults, think that food just kind of grows in grocery stores.
I was going to say for Green City Market, we have the edible garden, which is a 5,000 square foot teaching garden. And one of our mantras for the farmers market is our number one clientele is people that do their own gardens, because they understand what it takes how much work it takes, and they value that. So these kinds of initiatives are growing in so many different areas, but I think they're definitely connected.
And I see Howard asked about my online workshops.
Yeah,
what we normally try to do are things that are niche down. So we've had pest identification with Lawrence, I can't think of his last name, Alan Lawrence from Peggy Notabart Nature Museum. We've done a tomato intensive from Morton Arboretum. We've had someone teach us from Morton Arboretum, because nobody wants to sit and listen to me talk every single time that we have workshops. We've had disease control. We break down things in a way where you understand the science behind it and why you're doing what you're doing, instead of kind of just throwing old wives things at the Epsom salt. crushing up eggs and why that doesn't work immediately, why you have to do things. So we kind of have a science lesson. I have a biology background, so I nerd out a little bit. But it helps me too, because most people think, okay, so you're a farmer, you know everything, and we don't. So it allows me to grow in my organization and in my space, while also making sure that people all over the world, actually, we have a worldwide base, they can do what I'm doing at home at their homes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll be sure to tune in myself.
Yeah, and you can imagine the impact of something like that, beyond, I mean, it's just, to me, food is one of the most like common and straightforward applications of all of the things that Natasha was just talking about. It's like you can explore biology, chemistry, geology, geography, all through food, but the way that you do it when you're actually like on a farm in somebody's community and working with the folks, who are from there. I mean, that the ability to kind of apply that science as well is incredibly critical. Yeah, but I was also going to jump in and say, for the event at Natasha's, if y'all need a DJ, then I can jump on as well and bring out the sound system. So just letting y'all know. But that kind of organic, event kind of coming out of a conversation too is actually ends up being, pretty common side effect of having conversations in spaces that the community food navigator pulls together. It's like a bunch of people saying, oh, we've finally broke up in this conversation, and I trust the people in this room. So the thing that we want to do is figuring out how to address this issue collectively. We decide we want to do an event, we want to do some sort of activation of a farm space or collaboration. So I'm really glad that this kind of unfolded in the way that it did. So thanks, Bob and Sarah. Like this was really, really beautiful conversation.
Thank you guys. You did a great job.
Yes, thanks
Appreciate
to
it.
everybody. Thanks to this amazing group of people that hung on overtime. Thanks for your participation. We'll be sending out the recording of this soon. And again, thanks for participating. We feel like we're providing a service to this community, because I mean, who else in the media is really having in-depth conversations like this?
Will
So
you
thank
tell them about the July 15th, the next one?
Yes, we're going to be doing a webinar on July 15th, basically about reducing food waste. It's going to focus a lot on the Green Era project that Erica Allen of Urban Growers Collective has created, which is a massive anaerobic digester. It sounds complicated, but it basically turns food waste into compost and carries off some gases that are created to make it a net zero energy project. It's on Chicago's South Side. It's providing jobs for a lot of people. Eventually, Urban Growers Collective is going to move its flagship farm there. So, but we're also going to be bringing in people who have a lot of different perspectives on composting, reducing food waste. So we'll be finalizing our guests for that, and we'll have that out there for registration very soon.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody, for being on.
Yes, thanks. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, Nick.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.